In this video, I'm going to show you how to prepare your rustic cabin model for construction drawings in layout. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of this extra model. If you've been following along with these videos, I've used this technique where you open up my model and then make your own next to it. So I just want this model, which is finished with an interior. And I'm going to do a zoom extents so that I can see everything that's in my model. Actually, before that, I should make sure that all of my layers are turned on, which they are. If not, a shortcut to turn all your layers on at once is click, shift click, and then click on any of the check boxes. So that turns them all on. Another thing you want to check for is go to Edit, Unhide All. So that should unhide all of your geometry. So I'm going to use the Select tool. I'm going to draw a marquee from left to right and select all of that and then hit the Delete key. So now I have my one model. And I'll zoom extents again, which looks good. Okay, so one of the things I want to do with this model is actually turn shadows on so that we can have a nice cover image perspective in our construction drawings. So the first thing I'm going to do is rename this scene tab. I called it working. I'm going to come down here in my scenes window, which on the PC is in the default tray. On the Mac you would go to window scenes. And I'm just going to rename this cover. So this is eventually going to be the scene that will be on the cover of the construction drawings. And now I have three other scene tabs which showed some views of rooms on the interior. We're not going to be working on the interior in this class. We're just going to do some exterior elevations. So I'm actually going to get rid of those scenes. So again, in the scenes window, I'm going to click on living room and then shift click on kitchen. And I'm going to delete three scenes at once. So now I just have a single scene tab. And I'll kind of navigate and zoom in a bit to where I want it to be. And I will right click on that and update, which is going to save my camera position. And now I'm going to open up the shadows window. Again, this is in the tray if you're a Windows user. If not, go to Window on the Mac and open up your shadows. So first thing in the upper left corner here is a button that will turn shadows on. And then you see you have a date that you can control. So I'll just pick somewhere in the middle of summer, kind of between June and July. And I can swing this slider above and control the time of day. And in the next class, I'll actually show you how to do a nice solar animation using this. So it's great for solar studies. But what I want to do now is verify that my model is oriented properly, because we want this side of the building to be our north side. And as I swing the time of day, this is morning, this is afternoon. Kind of looks like this is the west side. It's getting hit by sun in the late day. So the way you orient is by using the red and green axis. And the way I always try to remember it is green is north. I just think of Greenland is the way to remember that. So the green axis is pointing north. The red axis, therefore, is pointing east. So I want to rotate this entire thing. So I could either lasso it all, or I can go to Edit, Select All. Where is that? There it is. Edit, Select All. Okay, so now I'm going to get the Rotate tool. And I'm going to keep it on this blue axis. So I'm going to go down here to the bottom of the slab, click once, move out towards the edge of the slab, click a second time, and then spin around here and type in 90 and press enter. So now the side of the building with no windows in it, which is our north side, is pointing towards the green axis. So that should be north. So we can kind of prove that. We'll go back to the shadows and swing this time of day. And you can see it's pretty much in the shade most of the day. And therefore this should be in the sun most of the day, the south side. And it looks like it is. So in late day, early day, we should have sun on the east side. See if we do. We do. And late day, we should be getting sun on the west side. So our shadows will be realistic now. So let's take a quick look at the rest of the stuff in the shadows. There is a check mark here, display on ground. And I want to show you that because if we get a big old shadow here, you can see that what SketchUp uses as the ground is simply this plane between the red and green axis, regardless of where you put your model. So the shadow is kind of showing up above some of the objects. So we really don't want that. So I'm going to turn that off. And we do want it on the faces. But I think to enhance this, we're going to draw a ground plane here. So I'm going to get my rectangle tool and I'm just going to stretch out a rectangle. And I'm grabbing this one side with the select tool, M for move. And then I'm just going to move this line and try to lock into an axis as I do it. So I'm locked into my red axis. And I'll grab this line with the select tool and move this axis. So now we have a little bit of a ground plane and we can move this up or down as necessary. It looks like it's got to go down a little bit. The first thing, I'm going to triple click, right click and group it. And then I can go to my materials window. And actually I was playing with this earlier, so I've already got a grass set up here, but this is in landscaping, fencing, and vegetation. So I'm going to click on this, and now we've got a nice green surface. And now you can see the shadow being projected on this surface. And as we move this down, I'm going to select it with the select tool, M for move, and I'm going to move it down and align it to the bottom of our step here. You can see that now the shadows have nicely projected down on our surface here. So that's going to look good in our cover. If you want, you could make this much bigger so you see all sorts of green around here. And in one of the future classes, we will get into making this actually a contour instead of a perfectly flat site, which usually does not exist. So let's see, let's go back to our layers here. And I did a little renaming before I started this video, and I used to have an EX layer. I renamed that site. So the site is going to contain our decks, our fireplace, and let's make one more site layer. So I'll make a new layer, type in site : ground. And now the site group is selected, and I can confirm that up in the entity info. It's assigned to layer 0 by default because this radio button was set here, and that should always stay there as we've discussed. And now I'll drop down this list and pick site ground. Now, if we've still got our master layer going, which we don't, let me pretend that I do have a master layer. So very quickly, I'm going to make what that master layer was. It had all of this decking material, and it had the fireplace, and it had the bluestone caps. So I've selected all of that. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to make it a group. So these are all now groups within a group, and that outer group I'm going to assign to site with dashes. So now with a single click, I can turn all the site stuff off, except for the fact that I now have this ground layer that I also want in my site group. So I want to show you two ways to manipulate groups, nested groups, I should say. So I'm going to turn our site on. This is probably the easiest way of doing it, and this is the only time that I use the outliner feature. So this is in the tray. If you don't see it in the tray on Windows, you can go to Window, Default Tray, and then select it. Let's see, where is the outliner? Right here. So it's already turned on. In Windows, you would go to Window and choose Outliner. So if I click on this master group, I see a group over here highlighted in the outliner, and I'm just going to open it up, and then if I click on things within here, it's actually selecting, as I click on each one of these, a different group within the group. So if you're going to use the outliner extensively, I would actually rename these things. So you can right click, and I'm going to call this Site Master Group. So now I know what it is when I'm looking at it inside the outliner. And you could do the same. I'll name one of these things. This looks like it's the chimney. So I'm going to right click, rename, and make that the chimney. Okay, so I'm not going to take the time to name all of these groups, but it's much easier to use this outliner if you name all your groups and components. So what I want to do is I want to put this ground inside my site master group. And I can see where it is by just clicking on it in the model, and it becomes highlighted in the outliner. So again, I'll right click, I'll rename that, and I'll just rename that the ground. Okay, so we have a ground group. If I drag that right on top of the site group, it is now inside site. So if I right click on the site group and select hide, everything gets hidden. Right click on it and unhide, it's back again. And the same with our layers. So now I can control all of the site information by just clicking on and off this master layer. So that's one way to manipulate groups or components inside of other groups or components. But I don't actually use that method. I think it's easier to understand, but here's a much faster way of doing it. So I'm going to Control Z to the point where I'm going to do it one more time, two more times. Let's see, is that separate? Nope. Do it a bunch more times. Okay, now I've got a separate group because I click on this ground group, nothing else is highlighted, but I still have my master group here. So without getting into the outliner, I'll close that down. Here's the way of doing it. If I click on a group, it's not inside this master group yet, and I'm just going to cut it. So I'm going to go to Edit, Cut. So I'm erasing it, but I put it in the paste buffer, basically. And now I double click on my master group, so that's open, and I do an Edit, Paste in Place. There it is, and now I can right click and close the group. And if I turn my site master group off and on again, you can see it's now part of that group. Now let me back up one bit here and show you the difference between paste and paste in place. So I'm at the stage right here again. I undid, I Control Z'd a bunch to get back here. And now if I just do a paste, I'm doing the same thing, but I've got to physically locate that somewhere and then click, which in this case would be all right, but in other cases when you have an object that you want to put at its current position in another group, which is usually the case, you wouldn't do this. You would go to Edit, Paste in Place, and then it goes right to its position when it was cut. So I'm going to close that group. So that's a nice way to control that. And let's very quickly see if we have our other master groups set up properly. So there's our level 1 only. I'm sorry, I turned off level 2, and that's turning off level 1. So I have independent control of master control of level 1, level 2, and site. And then XX are our special layers. The only one we have right now is the hidden layer. Oh, and that's interesting. This was in the other model, so I'm going to select that and delete it, and then unhide our hidden layer on the wall. Okay, so we've oriented the site for shadows properly. So this is our north side, and we put a ground down so that the shadows are projected down on the ground. So now let's set this up so that it looks nice. I think this is the best view of our cabin. I don't want to look at the north side because it's got nothing on it. and it's got our two decks here. So let's go back to shadows, and let's just get a shadow that is not so prominent. So I'm going to go somewhere around noon, and actually I can kind of change the time of year to control the shadow too. So that looks pretty good, and the shadow setting is going to get saved when I update this scene. So in order to set these scenes up for our construction drawings, I need a few more tools on my toolbar. So I'm going to go to View, Toolbars, and scroll down here. I know I'll eventually need my section tools. We won't get into that in this recording, but in the next. And I also want styles, and most importantly, I want views. So I'm going to close this, and I'll kind of verbally show you, or verbally describe how to do this on a Mac. But on the PC, I just opened up all of these toolbars, and then I can kind of drag them up here. On a Mac, you want to go to View, Toolbars, and then you can drag your toolbars out of a dialog box that will pop up. So the most important one to get are these views. So if I hover over these, I can see I have a front view, a right view, back view, and left view. And those will give us our 4 elevations in combination with changing the camera perspective. So I'm going to start with our front view. And you can see we still have perspective turned on. So I'm going to go to Camera and go into Parallel Projection. And now we have what looks like an elevation of the south side. So there are some issues here, but the first thing I'm going to do is make a scene. So I'll open up my scene window. So window scenes on the Mac or over in the tray on the PC. And I'm going to create a scene, and I'm going to call it South Elevation, or ELEV. Doesn't really matter what you name these as long as you know what they are. Okay, so let's go back to our cover. And then I'm going to go to the south elevation just to make sure we saved it properly. Now, a couple issues here. One, I can see this ground plane as this line here. And I can also see the steps. And most importantly, I have this big old chimney in the way. So I'm going to go to Layers. And I'm going to turn off the Site Master layer, which is great. Everything got hidden at once. That's exactly what I want. But one thing I want to demonstrate here is if you think you're done, you're not, because you haven't updated the scene. So if I go back to my cover scene and then come back to south elevation, you'll see that all of that stuff came back because the last time the scene tab was saved, it had all these layers turned on. So if you turn off this master layer again, you have to come up here and right click and update on the scene. Another way of doing that is if you're selected down in the scene window, you can click on this update scene button. Okay, so now if I go to cover, I have my nice site layers showing, or site layer. And now if I go to south elevation, it's not showing. Now, another thing I noticed that's showing here are the shadows. And for purposes of elevation, I'm not sure I want that shadow on. So I'm going to go to my shadow dialog box, and I'm going to hit the master button to turn that off. And another thing I'm going to turn off is use sun for shading. And you'll see that there's a subtle difference here. Some things actually get shaded, so that if we were to come around to the back side of this model, you can see it's a little bit darker if I have use sun for shading on. If I turn that off, you can see it's going to be the same brightness throughout all of the sides. Okay, so I'm going to turn that off. Now I have lost my orientation. I had this nice flat on view, and I don't want to try to do that manually. So there's a couple of ways I can go back to my view tabs and do it that way. But let me show you another way of doing it. There's actually an undo view or previous view. So you can click on that and get back to where you were view-wise. Undo will not change the camera at all, but this previous view will. Okay, so we're back to the south elevation, and because we've changed our camera and because we've changed our shadows, we want to update. So I'll show you the other method of updating. South elevation is the current scene, and I'm going to click on this update tab. Now this looks a little different. This shows us all of the things that can be saved in a scene. And by default, we're saving all of these. Camera location, what's hidden and what's not, our visible layers and our layer panel, section planes we haven't gotten into yet, the style, so you can have an independent style for each scene. The shadow settings, which is what we were just changing, and axis location. So you can undo any of those, and those properties are not changed when you change tabs. But we'll get into that next week when we do some more elaborate scenes and styles. So I'm just going to update that. I think a better way is right-clicking and choosing Update, because then you don't see that extra dialog box. Okay, so we've got a south elevation set. So next I'm going to move over here to the right side. And now that looks to me, since these two sides are, well, they're not symmetrical, they're mirror image. Okay, so this is the back side. And again, we can refer to our axes. That's our north axis, so this is our east axis. So this should be our east elevation. So I'll click on that again. And our camera is already set to parallel projection because we had it set in this scene. So that's all good. What I need to do is make a new scene. So I'll click on plus, scroll down here, and I'll type in east elevation. Okay. Now I don't have to update when I create a scene. It saves all of the settings when they were created. But one thing I'm noticing here is these windows are transparent, and I'm seeing inside the building. And I'm not sure I want that. So, and it's probably the same here. Not so much of an issue here, but on this east side I am seeing some objects inside. So let's go to our styles and edit. And I'm going to turn off material transparency. So now we don't get transparency. And you can see that the style has a little update double arrow in it. It means that you need to save that. And I'm going to save it. I'm going to update it. And it renamed it Architectural Style 1, which is okay. So I'm going to use that style. If we go to select, and if I click on this drop down, I can see the styles in my model. So I have architectural style and I have construction drawing style. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use construction drawing style because I don't want this colored background here. You can see that I've got a background color of the ground and I've got a background color for the sky. And that's on a color printer. That's going to print. So I want something with a white background. So I'm going to click on this construction document style. And so since I've changed the style in my south elevation, I will right click and update it. And I'll go to my east elevation. And I'm going to right click. Well, I need to change my style. So I'm going to click on the construction drawing style in the styles dialog box. And I'll right click and update that. And you can see, I think what I did previously in this style is I turned off the transparency. I went into edit and I turned off this material transparency and I updated the style. So you may have to do that in your construction drawing style if you don't want to see into the building. Turn off that material transparency and then update your style. Okay, so the nice thing is once you get going here, the next style is going to use everything you've got set. I'm sorry, the next scene tab. So if we go to the third view here, this is called back. That's definitely our north side. So I'm going to make a new scene. Let me close down styles. And by default, it comes up as scene 4. So I'm going to call that north elevation and press enter. And that has the style that I want and all looks good. So I don't need to update it. And I'm going to go to the last elevation. And I'll cheat by looking at my axes. This is my north axis here, so this should be my west elevation. So now I'm going to do an undo camera to go back to my flat non-perspective. And I will type in, well, I'm going to make a new scene first. So scene 5, and then I'll type in west elevation. Okay. So let's just check it. This is our west. That's our north, our east, and our south. So we've got 4 nice scene tabs, and we've also got our cover artwork with our shadows turned on and some green grass. So that prepares the SketchUp file for going into layout. So the first thing we want to do here is save. So I save my model, and I'm going to go back to the file menu and select send to layout. So when you do that, layout automatically opens up, and the first thing you're presented with is an option for paper. So I'm going to go to paper, plain paper. And if you have a big printer like an 11 by 17, you could pick tabloid, or if you have, other sizes, A3, A4. I'm not going to assume you have a big printer, so I'm just going to go to letter landscape and open this up. Now you see that a SketchUp scene automatically popped up here, which is nice. And this area, when I click on this, this is called a viewport. So this is a view into the SketchUp model. So if I use my mouse wheel, I'm zooming in and zooming out on the page in layout. I'm not zooming in and zooming out of the SketchUp model. And if I hold down my shift key, I can actually move this page around. Shift key and middle mouse button, I'm panning. Same thing I could do here with the scroll bars. So zoom and pan works by default in the page, the 2D page that we're creating in layout. But if I double click with my left mouse button, I can actually orbit this SketchUp model inside of layout to get a different view of this. And I can use my middle mouse wheel to zoom, and I can hold down the shift key and I can pan. So I have all of the same navigation controls in layout that I do in SketchUp. Okay, but that's not, sometimes that comes in handy, but what I like to do is totally define what I want to print in SketchUp, because it's set there, and next time I come in, I don't have to worry about accidentally navigating this or changing it. Okay, so that's our initial scene. And let me show you around layout here. So you got a bunch of tools on the top here. We'll go into what most of these are. They're pretty straightforward. This is our pointer tool, very much like in SketchUp Select. We can draw lines. We can do arcs. Basically, this is a nice little 2D drawing program. I can draw a rectangle. There's ways to fill it. There's ways to change the border size. I can, create text, all sorts of good stuff here. And also an erase tool, which will come in handy here, so we can erase all this stuff. Okay, so we'll get into all of these, but basically pretty straightforward tools. And then over in this default tray, we have a number of things here. Most importantly, the pages in our document. So we're on page 1 right now, and we can reproduce pages and name them. Text style, we'll get into fonts and bolding and italics and font size. Dimension styles, when we start dimensioning, we can actually use different styles, different arrows, and whether the dimension actually is above, below, or right in the middle of your dimension line. So we'll get into all of these. I'm getting ahead of myself here. But let's start with trying to compose this cover page. So first thing I'm going to do is go back to my pointer tool here, my select tool, and click on the viewport. I'm actually going to make this bigger. My printer can print very close to the edge here, so I just as soon have a bigger viewport into my SketchUp model. So I'm just clicking and holding down over these 4 arrows and making that bigger and kind of centering it in my page, just visually using the arrow keys. Okay, so next I'm going to make a frame around this. So if I click on this viewport once and I go into my shape style and I'm going to select a stroke, and now you can see a black line has appeared around here, and I can actually select the thickness. So I'm going to go to 1.5 points, and I'm just going to make a very quick little title box here. So I'll go to rectangle tool. I'm going to select a stroke ahead of time of 1.5, and I'll start right in this upper corner, and I'm just going to make a little box for a title block. So I made a rectangle there. If I go back to the select tool, I can select that rectangle, and now in shape style I'm going to select fill with white, so now it fills the rectangle. I didn't have to. I can turn that off and it would be transparent. You can put patterns in it, etc. But in this case we're going to fill it, and I'm going to put a little divider line here too, right about here. So I'm just drawing a horizontal line, and that's coming out in 1.5 points too, so fairly bold. So I'm going to hit escape to get out of that tool, and I'm going to put some text in here. So I go to the text tool and I'm going to click here, and I'll just type in Rustic Cabin SketchUp workflow for architecture. Okay. Now I'm going to click on that and show you that you can change the font. So I'm going to go down to text style. Let me pick a kind of a standard Windows font, Calibri. Let's do something different. Cambria Math. No, that's a little whacked out. Alright, let's pick something that looks kind of good here. How about elephant? No. Getting a little too choosy here. Alright, Georgia. Old standby. Okay, so it looks like we can get a little bit bigger of a point size there. And I'm going to center this a little bit. And actually, I'm going to go to my text style and right justify it. And then in this section, I will do something that will be particular for the page. And I want to show you how you can do that automatically. Okay, so Rustic Cabin SketchUp Workflow for Architecture is kind of the title that we want to appear on every page. So in Layout, I'm going to go to Layers. And everything that you draw here can be assigned to layers, similar to in SketchUp. And the default layer is where everything will go automatically unless you assign it to another layer. But there's this layer on every page, which is very useful. So I'm going to right click on this Rustic Cabin, and I'm going to move to layer on every page. Now that's going to show up in every page, but look at how it hid itself. And what happened is I've also got this rectangle here with a white background. And I want to move that to on every page. So move to layer on every page. And then I'm going to move my every page layer, drag this up so that that's on top. And I'm going to hide my default layer just to see what's going on with my text. And somehow I've hidden my text inside here. So let me move this away. There's my text. Okay. So that text is on, going to be on every page. So I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to do an arrange, bring to front. And now I should be able to move it over the top of this. See if that works. And that did. And move this one down. Now this is going underneath, so I'm going to move this to the front too. So I'm going to right click, move this to layer on every page, and then right click and arrange, bring to front, and move this down. So now we can kind of group this stuff together. So I'm going to move that up a little bit. So I'm going to click, shift click, shift click. I probably should have grouped all this ahead of time, but I didn't. So anyway, right click, make group. And now I'm just going to use my arrow keys, and I can hold down shift to get a bigger movement with my arrow keys and move that back up. So this title block is going to stay up on every page, and then we're going to have an area here that will be particular to each page. Let me move this, right click, ungroup temporarily, and just move this line up a little bit so we have a little bit more room. And I'll move this up a little bit. Okay. All right. So we've got the start of a title block. You guys can take that a lot further, customize it for your own company, etc. I just want to show you how you get an automatic title that is linked to the page name. So in here, I want to add some text. So I'm going to click on here. I've started to add some text. And if I go to the text menu and select Insert Auto Text, Page Name. You can also do page number or anything like that. So I've got the page name, and if I double click on this page, I'm going to call that cover. And now it didn't show up because I think I'm running into the same problem where I need to move that to a particular layer. So I'm going to turn off my on every page layer. There's my cover text, and I want that to also appear on every page. So I'm going to right click and go to move to layer on every page. Let's turn on every page. Okay, so great. So that's there, and I want to change this to the same font as I have here. So I'm actually going to use my eyedropper, select all the font and other font, point size, other attributes of that, and just click on cover. And now that is the same font, same font size, and the right justification too. So I'm going to move this over here so it's all kind of right justified. So maybe we'll come up with a better name for that. Let's say project for yestermorrow. So I'm giving the page a name. You know, it comes up as page 1 by default. And so this will automatically fill in with every page we do for the rest of the construction drawings, for the rest of our pages, which will be elevations. So another thing I want to make you aware of is this nice scene came up by default, but is it the proper scene that we want? We've got I clicked and I went back to my SketchUp model, and I'm seeing that I've got a cover tab, scene tab here. And when I go back to layout, I want to show you that it looks a little bit different because we double clicked and we moved around in here. So, but what we really want, let me click outside of here to close it. What we really want is to select a scene tab from SketchUp and have that display exactly in our viewport here. So I'm going to right click and go down to scenes, and this is a real gotcha. This something that took me a while to get over. When you first open up something in Layout from SketchUp, like we did, we sent it to Layout, Layout will automatically display the last saved view in SketchUp. Not a scene tab, but the last saved view. So we almost always do not want that. I want to change it to one of these scene tabs, and you can see cover, south elevation, east elevation, north and west elevation. Those are the names of our 5 tabs. If I go back to SketchUp, you can see those are exactly the name of those 5 tabs. So back in Layout, I right click, I go to Scenes, and I'm going to select the cover. And now you can see it changed a little bit. And if I go back to SketchUp, you can see that's the exact perspective that I wanted. So that's a real gotcha. Even though it looks like it might be the right scene initially on the first page, you always want to right click on it and select one of your predefined scenes. Okay, great. Now, the next thing we are going to do is to make our first elevation. So let's start off with the east elevation. So there's 2 ways to make a new page. The simplest way is to just click on this duplicate button. And this is called page 2. And if you look closely, we see page 2 here. If I click on this first page, the only difference is one's saying project for tomorrow and the other is saying page 2, because we made an identical copy. So we copied this SketchUp viewport and we got a new page number or a new page name. So first thing, we're going to start with the east elevation. So I'm going to name this page East Elevation. I like to do that first because then I can look up in my title block and understand what I'm trying to get. And then I can right click on this and go down to Scenes and select my East Elevation, and there it is. Okay, so now that we have an elevation, we actually want to set the scale of this. And there's a couple ways to do that. In the SketchUp model, you can see you can pull down a scale here and select one. And the current scale is just some arbitrary scale based on how you zoomed in SketchUp, so it's almost never set properly when you come in. Or another way you can do it is just right click on the SketchUp in the viewport itself and go down to scale, and I'm going to try 1/2 inch scale here, and that's too big for our page size. So I will right click and go down to scale and pick 1/4 inch. Okay, that looks good, and I think we'll use that throughout all our 4 elevations. I think that's going to work. So we are now on the second page, which is our east elevation. We have our east elevation scene displaying in SketchUp. So all is good. Now let's go through our dimensions. So I'm going to click on my dimension tool, and I'm going to start by being right here. I'll zoom in a little bit to show you what I'm doing. I'm clicking, moving over to the rough opening, clicking again, moving straight down, and clicking a 3rd time. And I get my dimension showing there. So now I will go from one side of the door rough opening to the other. So I'm going to click here, move to the other side, click, and then come down, align with my other dimension, and click. Same here, I will click, and now I want to go up and I want to reference that window. So I did my first click, I haven't done a second click yet. I'm going to move up to my window rough opening, hold down my shift key, and now I'm coming straight down on that green axis. As long as I'm on that green axis, I'm good. And I will click and then move my dimension down, align it, and click. Okay, so here's my 4th dimension. I'm clicking here. I'll do the same thing. Move up to the rough opening, hold down the shift key, come straight down along the axis, make sure it's green, click, and align to my other dimension. And the last one here, I start here, and this one I can just stay right on the slab and click there. Okay, so let's look at those dimensions, because we can do a lot with these dimensions. It has its own dimension style box, so I'm going to open that up. I'll close the rest of them to not to confuse you. Okay, so dimension style. I'm going to click on all of these. So I'm clicking, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click. So I've got all my dimensions highlighted. And now I'm going to hover over this which says center. So now this centered the dimension within the lines. And another thing I can do is I can go up to my shape style and select an arrow. So let's say I want just a slash instead of an arrow. So my starting arrow is going to be a slash. My ending arrow is going to be a slash. And so that's looking a little better. So now I'm going to go to fonts, text style. And let's go up to Calibri and 10 point. I'm going to go to Calibri Light. Make it a little smaller. Okay, so 10 point. So now I've got a nice font selected. And there are my dimensions. So I'm going to make a new dimension line across the entire bottom here. So I'm going to start on the base of the slab, click a second time, and I get my 16 feet. And now you notice that I'm not getting the slash and I'm not getting the font that I used on the last one. What you have to do is kind of pre-select this, set the fonts, set the styles. But if you forget to do it like I did, you can go to the eyedropper and you can pick up a style of any of your drawing elements. So in this case, it's going to get the dimension style and the font, and then I'm going to use the bucket to put it on top of 16. So that's a nice little shortcut way if you forget to pre-select what you're doing here. Now, if I try to get a dimension of this outside wall, I think I'm going to run into a problem here, because the roof is overhanging and layout is not snapping to that point. So if I do that, I know that I think it's 10'6", and I'm getting 10'5" and 47/64. Not what I want. Here's one way around it, which is not the right way to do it. So I can go to select and I can double click on this dimension. And I can actually type in what I want here. So double click and I can type in 10'6", but that is a bogus dimension. That's just whatever I type in. I could put in 100 feet here. So that is really not the way to do it. So I'm going to undo. And if you can't snap to something, you might have to go back into your SketchUp model, which I will do here. And let's see, we were in let's go back to layout. I want to see what elevation I'm in. So I'm using the mouse wheel to zoom out and I'm panning so I can see I'm in the east elevation. Okay, so back to SketchUp. I'm going to go to my east elevation scene tab, and I'm going to go up to my layers and I'm going to turn off L2 roof. And now when I dimension it, I'll be able to snap to that point and that point very easily because I don't have this overhanging thing. And in 2D, layout didn't know how to resolve this and didn't know how to go from this, which is not a point it could intersect with, back to that point. So I'm going to turn the roof off and let me hit my undo camera 3 times. Okay, so now I need to update my scene tab. Okay. So my scene does not have the roof, but this is just temporary. I'm going to come back in here and turn the roof back on after we get that dimension. But before we go back into layout, I also have to save my model. So the process was I changed what my scene was. I turned off the roof layer. I updated my scene tab by right-clicking on it and updating it. And then I went to File, Save. Now, I don't want to go send to layout because that's going to open up a new copy of layout. I'm going to hit escape. I'm just going to go back to my layout program. And now, when I get my select tool here and right click and select update model reference, in a second or two, you'll see I now have a new scene that does not have that roof on it. And I can go to my dimension tool, and now it snaps right there. It snaps right there. and I get my legitimate 10'6" dimension. Okay, that's great. But now let's say I want my roof back on. Okay, so I'm going to go back to SketchUp. I'm in my east elevation. I turn my roof on, and I have to update the scene because I changed some of the layers that are visible. So I update the scene. I save the file. I go back to layout, and I go to select tool, right click, and update model reference. And now my roof is back, but I still have my dimension. So that back and forth action between SketchUp and layout is something that you will do a lot. You will see stuff in your elevations or your sections, or as you're doing your construction drawings, you'll realize that either you've messed something up in SketchUp, or you're not able to snap to a certain point. So it's very common to have to go back and forth. But the process is, if you change the scene in SketchUp, you got to save the scene, you got to update it, and then you've got to save your SketchUp document, come back to layout, and then you need to update your model reference. So I right-clicked inside this viewport and selected Update Model Reference. Okay, so for the roof pitch, there's a couple things you can do. I'm going to actually come up to my Dimension tool and pick Angular. And I'm going to start here on the edge of the roof, click on that endpoint, and establish a horizontal line here. Click a second time. Come back to this starting point, click, and then go up the edge of the roof. Click again, and then move so that I'm getting this 45-degree angular dimension. Put that where I want, and click. A second way is if you know you have a 12-12 roof pitch. This is probably a little more standard. I can go to my line tool, and I'm going to draw a horizontal line. And I'm just looking down in the length in the bottom here and seeing that that's about a ½ an inch. So I'm going to type in 0.5 and enter. So that just drew a ½ an inch line. So I'll make this other side the exact same. So I'll type in 0.5 on a vertical line and then hit escape. And then you can go to your text tool and actually type in 12. And go to my select tool here, move that over a little bit. And I'm going to hold down my control key, which is Command on the Mac, and make a copy of that and drag it over here. And of course you could change the font and do whatever you want for that. So there's a nice little 12-12 roof pitch. Okay, so let's move on and do our next elevation. So now I'm going to show you a different way to reproduce a page. If I reproduce this page, and let's call this our south elevation. So I'm going to double click on this page 3, type in south elevation. Other than this title, it looks identical to the previous page because we reproduced that page. So one way of doing this is to, well, let's go ahead and establish our south elevation first. So I'll right click, go down to scenes, pick south elevation, and now you see we've got a bunch of dimensions that we don't really want. I could get my select tool and click and erase, start erasing this stuff. If I hit delete, I start erasing this one by one. But I'm going to actually undo. So I'm doing Control Z, back to the point where I have only 2 pages. So now instead of reproducing this duplicating the entire page, I'm going to create a new page. It's blank except for the information that shows up on every page because of our on every page layer in layout. So first thing, I'm going to name this south elevation. But now we need a viewport into SketchUp. So let's go back here and let's just click on this viewport. And I'm going to do a copy. So Control C. And click on south elevation page and do a Control V. And there's our viewport. And what I didn't get, which I didn't want, were all of the dimensions. So I got my title block, I got my page title, and now I have a viewport into SketchUp. It's also got that east elevation scene on it, but it does not have the dimensions. So that's great. So I will right click on this, select the scene I want, which is the south elevation. So again, this is coming out of the Scene tab in SketchUp. And let's go ahead and do our dimensions now. So I'll go up to Linear Dimension, and I'm going to click here and come across to the rough opening, hold my Shift key down, and move down and click. Now I'll show you a little shortcut. So I start on the slab. I'm going over here to the other side rough opening, holding down the Shift key, and that doesn't look quite right. It says, oh, here we go, 6-4. Okay. Now I'm going to double click. So single click would have finalized this, and I could have stretched it down to align to the dimension line that I have started, but double click is a fast way of doing this. So I'm going to start on the bottom of the slab, move over to the edge, and double click. And now it goes down and aligns itself there. So I'll make an overall length here from one edge of the slab to the other and move that down. And if we obviously want to do the math here, so 5 and 6 is 11, and we've got 4 inches and 8 inches, so that makes it 12, plus another 12 is 24. So everything looks like it is dimensioned properly, but you always want to check those things. Okay, so now the height of the door. If I start here and click down, I can see that that's 6'8", and I drag this out. That's one way of doing it, but I don't like these leaders going all the way back. So I'm going to show you 2 ways of doing this. One, I'm going to hit spacebar for select. I'm going to double click on somewhere on this dimension. And now I can hover over this end, and I can actually move this leader out and move this leader and actually align to this other one. And that looks good. I'm just going to Control Z a couple of times to show you another way. So I'll go back to my dimension tool. And now I'm going to actually start here. Let's see if I can come up. I know that the door is starting on the base of my slab. So I'm coming up, and I'm going to hover over that rough opening, hold down my Shift key, move out to the edge, and then bring it out. So either way works. The second way is a little simpler in that you don't have to edit your leaders. So that looks good. I think I have all the dimensions I need in that elevation. I'm just going to go up and save my layout file, and I will call that just Rustic Cabin. And that will be a .layout file. Okay, so let's check our pages again. We've got our cover page. We've got our east elevation with dimensions and roof pitch. We've got our south elevation. So let's make a west elevation. So I'm going to duplicate the page this time, and first thing I'm going to do is name this page West Elevation, just so I don't confuse myself. And then, oops, let me do that one more time, get rid of that apostrophe. There we go. So I can see in my title block that it's set to West Elevation. Now I'm going to get rid of my dimensions before I change the scene. So select, I can click on a dimension and delete, click, delete, click, delete, click, delete. Okay. So I've gotten rid of all my dimensions. Now I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to go down to scenes and select my west elevation. And there it is. So that looks good. More dimensions. So I'm going to start on the base of my slab, come over, reference my rough opening, hold the Shift key down, come straight down along the green axis, and then establish how far out I want to go. So click. I'm going to start right here. Click. Go up to my rough opening. Shift key down. Now I'm going to double click, which will automatically align it down there. Start on my slab. Click. Go over to my rough opening. Shift key down. Double click. Click. Oops. Now here I started in the wrong spot. I started right here. If I do this, let me do it and see what happens. Click here, click here. I can still move this down, but you see that my leader length is a little different because I started here instead of here. Again, we could adjust those leader lengths, but why do the extra work? So I'm going to Control Z out of that and realize that I want to start right here. And you can see that green axis line snapping right to my rough opening. So I can click, go up there, touch that rough opening, hold down the Shift key, double click. Oops. I'm going to undo that. I think it's not going to double click because I did this dimension starting up here. So my double click is no longer going to work. So I will redo that. Click once here, get my rough opening straight down here, and then bring it down and snap it to that line. Click. And now my double click should work. So I'm going to go here, click there, double click, bang. All right. So we've got all of our window and door dimensions in here. I'm going to do an overall dimension, which is 16, and then I'm going to very quickly add things up. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and 2 6s is 16. So that works. Okay. So that's our east elevation. And we have one more. So again, I'm going to duplicate the page. Comes up with page 6 here. I'm going to double click here. And what are we missing? We're missing our north elevation. North elevation. Okay, so I'm going to delete my dimensions, which I don't want on the north elevation yet anyway. And I'm going to right click on my SketchUp model and select my north elevation. That looks right. Doesn't have any window openings, so this is pretty easy to dimension. I will click on the slab, click a second spot, come down with my 24 inches, and that's about all I'm going to do there. So let's go back and check it out. We've got our cover page, which has got the shadows enabled. We've got our title block, and then we've got our elevations to scale, 1/4 inch scale. You know, if we wanted to say that in our title block, we could easily affix another text item here. All right, so they look a little plain Jane. I think what I want to do is actually display the deck in one of these and just show you again that sequence of going back and forth between SketchUp and layout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to purposely change this east elevation to have our deck, which is going out on this side, onto the south side. So we will go back to SketchUp. First I'm going to save this, which is always a good idea. I'll save my layout file. I will go back to SketchUp. And so I wanted to modify my east elevation. I happen to be in that scene, which is great. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to go to my site, turn on that entire site layer. And now I can turn off individual things. So I am going to turn my ground plane off because it's just going to look like a horizontal line here. So I'm going to turn the ground plane off. And this is what I want. I want my fireplace deck, and I want my stand-up deck. And this is on the east elevation. So I need to update this because I've turned on some additional layers. So I right-click and update. I also want to save my SketchUp model. Now when I go back to layout, I need to update my reference here. So select tool, right click, update model reference, and then within a second or two, this stuff appears. Okay. So I also want to show you that when you update the model reference, it updates throughout the entire layout model. But since these other scenes did not change, those scenes have all that site information turned off. So just on this east elevation page, we have our 2 decks, which is what we want. But now you can see, because everything moved around a little bit, our dimensions got a little screwy. So sometimes you can actually click on this and move it. So I'll try moving this carefully. And you can see the dimension kind of changes. I think at this point it's probably best to redo those dimensions. Let's see if we can move these guys though. So I'm going to try to move all of these at once. So I'm shift clicking on these, and I'm going to move these up, and see all of our leader lines have changed too. So I'm actually going to delete all of this. These two, I think I can easily click on all pieces there and move that to the side. And I can move our 45-degree marker, and actually if you wanted this out here you can do that, but I'm going to put it right on top of the building the way it was. So I'm just using the arrow keys to do that. Okay, so now I'm going to redimension the bottom here. So I'll get my dimension tool. I'm going to start on the bottom of the slab, move over to the rough opening, hold down my shift key. Let me zoom in so I can see what I'm doing. There we go, 3/6. So it's a good idea to know your dimensions, or at least to know what's pretty close to your dimension. Oh, I started on the wrong spot there. So I'm going to start on the bottom of the slab, up to the rough opening, click down there. So here, rough opening. Oh, I started on the wrong spot again. I'm going to start there on the bottom of the slab, move up to the rough opening, hold down the shift key. There we go. Bottom of the slab, to the other side of the rough opening, holding down shift key. Now I know that that window is 3.0, so I'm going to hit escape here. Make sure that I'm aligned right there. I can see the green axis going down to my last leader line. So I will click right there and go up to my rough opening, hold down the shift key, get my green. And again, it's showing 3.1. See, when I move down here, you can see the overlap. So I have definitely started on the wrong spot. Right there is where I want to start. So I clicked, go up here, hold it down, acquire my green axis, and then I get 3.0, which is the proper dimension. And the last one, start on the slab, move to the outside of the slab. And then I can do my overall dimension, which is pretty easy. And again, I want to check my dimensions. So what do I have here? I have 1 foot 2, and 10 is 2 feet, plus 3 is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, that adds up. And of course, you can dimension your deck here, 12 feet, or even put that on a different line, whatever you want to do. Okay, so that's basically it. I think I've covered everything. The biggest thing to remember is this process to go between SketchUp and Layout. So initially, you open up Layout by sending to Layout, which will open up the Layout program. You end up picking your page, your paper size, and then once you're in Layout, you create pages, you display a scene from SketchUp on each of those pages. And then if you need to do something in SketchUp, for instance, we re-enabled these decks to be displayed. When you're in SketchUp, you need to, change your visible layers in this case, turn some on. You need to update your scene tab. You need to save your document. Then back in Layout, you need to right-click and update your model reference. And that's the full round tripping between SketchUp and Layout. It's a little cumbersome, but you do get used to it pretty quickly. Okay, that's it.